I have a thought I want to share with you. I believe we are all here for a reason. I do. I believe we all have a role to play, regardless of how big or small that role may be. So what might that look like for you? As a female, an immigrant, and a researcher on leadership, I believe that perspective is everything. Just take a second to think about that statement. A good friend of mine recently asked me, Georgette, what are some of the biggest obstacles you faced in life, and how did you overcome them? As I thought about that question, I thought, biggest. And I said, wow, I really can't think of a lot. And he said, George, come on. Surely you can think of an example. And as I paused and I reflected on this, I thought, well, yeah, there have been challenges or problems or whatever you might want to call them. But I guess the way my mind works was I was less focused on the wall in front of me and more so focused on how I get around, through, or over whatever problem may be facing me. Because you know what? There will always be challenges along the way. So focusing on what you can achieve and what you want to achieve and doing it well, that is success, that is leadership, and that can be very rewarding. So, was life easy peasy for me? Is it for anyone? So, I arrived in Canada in 1975, mid-November, in Oshawa, at a time when cultural diversity, inclusion, and tolerance were not necessarily part of our vocabulary, or certainly not of our everyday vocabulary. In case you're wondering, I'm the one in the fabulous brown boots and the red skirt. And that's my mom and my two sisters and our brand new Buick that we had just bought when we arrived in Oshawa. So there I am, 7 years old, completely out of my element. We had never seen snow, let alone snow boots or a snowsuit. And I was enrolled at Dr. C.F. Cannon Public School in Oshawa, where the principal was quite hesitant to keep me in grade 3. Because of my lack of English proficiency. So eventually I get enrolled in grade 3, and I passed grade 3 with C's and C++. But by the time I got to grade 5 and 6, I was getting some of the highest marks in the class and received some recognition. Ta-da, see, it's even on one of those old albums. Nothing was digital back then. So there I was in grade 7, and then fast forward to grade 9, and I go to high school. I'm at G.L. Roberts in Oshawa, and I'm feeling like a complete outsider again, because I don't look like any of these girls. They're skinny, they've got beautiful, long hair, and there I was with the most unruly hair you can imagine, and no matter how many times I ironed it, it would just go frizzy. So this is well before product. So these are the original Charlie's Angels, in case some of you may not know, and I always wanted to be Kelly, the one in the gray. Yes, so I didn't look like this. And as I was in high school, I would often lay in bed thinking, about who I was. I'd think about school, I'd think about my friends, and who I was at the core, because I clearly would often stick out like a sore thumb. And as an immigrant, as I reflected on all this stuff, I realized, well, I was a little different and a little unique, but that was okay. And I learned to embrace the fact that I was different. And somehow, strangely enough, convincing myself that I was different and it was okay gave me a whole new perspective on life. In many ways, it allowed me to get comfortable in my own skin, allowing me to be me. And I have to tell you, when you can project that kind of confidence, it is just amazing, amazing how your life will change. Ta-da. So, I decided early on to focus on the things that I felt mattered. And so, in my mind, those were, what makes a good human being? Kindness, thoughtfulness, generosity, a good sense of humor whenever possible, graciousness whenever possible. But I also decided to double down on brains. Because you know what? Being smart and intelligent never, ever goes out of style. So when I started as a student at the University of Toronto, Scarborough, many years ago, it was really daunting. I didn't know anyone who'd been through that experience to explain simple things like bursaries or petitions or, how to manage your workload. However, and I only had one friend from my high school, but I recognized that being in a new environment with all of these new experiences, that I could be whatever I wanted to be. So I decided to reinvent myself. Literally, I ran for student council, I wrote for the underground, I worked for the alumni office, I did all sorts of things. And as a result of that, I learned and I grew and I was overwhelmed and I succeeded and I graduated. I did. So when the opportunity came to work at the University of Toronto, upon my graduation, the Canadian economy was facing a terrible recession. And so I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to work at U of T, I'll do it for 6 months, and then I am so, out of here. Well, 26 years later, I know it happens, right? 26 years later, I have had the honor and privilege of working at the university, doing many things and serving our students and our larger community, from counseling, to doing awards and honors, to managing large budgets, to supporting curriculum reform, to doing alumni relations and fundraising, and the list just goes on. But it only recently dawned on me, just recently, that I was actually the most senior female administrator on this campus. So how did I get here? Well, when I stuck out like a sore thumb, I realized at the time when I was younger that I had to like myself and know myself. And so this was this constant process of, improving. And I realized it was really important to try to be kind, because it's really hard to dislike someone who's killing you with kindness. But I also realized that we are all special and unique. Now, I know many of you may think that's something your mama tells you, but it's true. It is. You're all special and unique. You all bring a gift into this world. You may just know what it is, may not know what it is just yet, but you do. So what happens when you're faced with challenges? Well, let me share with you a true story. So a few years ago, I was being interviewed for a job, not this one, but a job. And it was a 3-person panel, and partway through the interview, a fellow on the panel looks at me and says, "What is your background?" Now, I knew he meant my ethnicity, which is not as per the HR script I'm going to tell you. And I said, "My degree is in English and political science." And he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Oshawa." Now, I could tell that he was getting a little annoyed, and so he looks at me again, he says, "How do you deal with the impossible?" And all I could think was, and a few other words, but that came right across my head. And so without missing a beat, I looked at him and I said, "Nothing's impossible, I just haven't thought of a solution yet." And do you know what he did? He rolled his eyes at me in the middle of the interview. He rolls his eyes at me in the middle of the interview for that response, and I said, "Let me tell you why I said what I said." And I went on to explain that when I was working in this particular department, it was a small department, and in 3 short years, we turned that department around. We did that through hard work, we did that through great planning, we did that through strategy, we did that through working with a group of people, knowing who to call on, when to call on, and together, we succeeded. So nothing is really impossible if you can put your mind to it and know who to go to and when to go to do well. So, what about those things that don't go our way? The problems, or the jobs you didn't get, or the opportunities. What about those? Well, what my husband Charles will often say to me is this: sometimes things happen for a reason. And if something doesn't go your way, then that's okay, because you know what? It actually wasn't meant to be. There'll be something else down the road that's better for you. And you know what? He's absolutely right. And so, putting all that together and thinking about my role as a researcher and thinking about this, I realized that many of our immigrants actually share many of the soft traits we look for in leaders. Take a look at this slide and think about how many of these things resonate with who you feel you are, and how many of these things you see yourself in. I believe each of you has this capacity. So as I have matured and grown, I have learned to make sure that my voice is heard, but it's done so respectfully. I have learned that I bring a lot to the table, even if those sitting across from me or from across the table just don't know it yet, but they will. I have learned to challenge myself, because you know what? Getting out of your comfort zone will allow you to do some wonderful things and to grow as a person, and those are good things. And I have learned that we have no limitations. Those, my friends, are self-imposed. So, I challenge you to think about the cup as not half full or half empty, but to embrace the following philosophy. The cup is all full. It is. Half full is what most people see. That other half, that is untapped opportunity waiting for each of you to rethink, retool, restart, reposition, and achieve the success that you want. So, we have a choice. I want to share with you one other slide. As I was thinking about the diversity in some of the issues that have happened, and thinking about leadership, I came across this at catalyst.org, and I realized this country is beautiful. It's changed certainly since I've arrived in 1976. 1/5 of the Canadians are now visible minorities, and as you can see, more than half are women. But it's a highly educated group. And we have greater representations on boards than we've had in previous years, and as is the parliamentary representation. And the good news is the numbers are closing. There's still a wage gap, but you know what? Each of us can play a role in making a difference. So we all have a chance and a choice in terms of what we do with our opportunities. Do we play it safe? Are you going to be groundbreakers? And so when I recently read over a list, I don't know if any of you saw it on CBC, of the highest paid CEOs in Canada, I was actually surprised that there were only 2 women. But what's probably more surprising was how many men were named Mark, Michael, Charles, Donald, David, Robert. I'm like, whoa. And I thought to myself, you know, I hope in 10 years that list has a few more Mohammeds, or Alis, or Ritus, or Sanjeevs, or Ways, or Lees, or maybe even a Georgette on it. Yeah, you never know, I'm telling you. So, as immigrants, we all face challenges. We do. And when you're new to a new country, you can either sink or swim. So I want to leave you with a few thoughts for you to think about and reflect. Perspective is everything. It is. Take the time to reflect on your perspective, why you feel the way you do, and reframe. Nothing is impossible. It has been said, if you're going to do the same thing over and over, you're going to get the same results. So, remember, your cup, it's all full. It really is. Remind yourself that you're a project in the works. And so, when you have those disappointments, think of those as teaching moments and not disappointments, because you're going to grow, and you can dust yourself off, and you're going to be better for it. And know that it's hard to change others, but you can change yourself, how you behave, and how you respond to a situation. So, I challenge you in this ever-changing world, to make a positive impact and to think about the legacy that you want to leave behind. Because you see, my friends, the immigrant experience is never an easy one. It isn't. You can sink or you can swim, and swimming is way more fun. Thank you.